History is full of strange stories. Some are even stranger than fiction. And today we're going to dive into some of the most bizarre.
Did you know that some of Rome's most powerful emperors, men who commanded armies, built cities, and controlled the fate of millions, ended up dying in ways that would almost be comical if they weren't so tragic? We imagine emperors falling in grand battles or being taken out by cunning assassins in shadowy corridors, but the reality is often stranger. Some choked to death on food, others were taken down by the very things they loved most. And one, I swear, I'm not making this up, might have been killed by his own doctor in a medical accident that still makes historians shake their heads. Stick around, because number one on this list isn't just ridiculous. It's so absurd you'll think it was pulled from a satire, but it's documented history. Let's start with Emperor Numerian. The year was 284 AD, and Rome's vast empire was groaning under political instability. Numerian was a young ruler, more scholar than warrior, and after a campaign in the east, he started feeling unwell. What happened next became one of the strangest imperial mysteries. His generals claimed he was simply recovering in his covered carriage during the journey home, curtains drawn for privacy. Days later, the stench of decay began to seep out, and that's when they realized he had been dead the entire time. For possibly days, the Roman army had been marching alongside their emperor's rotting corpse. Some believe he was assassinated by his Praetorian prefect Aper, who conveniently stepped into a position of power afterward. Imagine the morale of the troops, thinking their leader was just resting, only to find they'd been guarding a dead man. In a modern 2025 context, this would be like a world leader disappearing from public view for a week, only for a breaking news alert to reveal they'd been dead the whole time. Then there's the tale of Emperor Carus, Numerian's own father, whose death is equally baffling. In 283 AD, Carus was leading a campaign against the Persians, with victory seemingly in his grasp. But then came a thunderstorm, and Carus supposedly died when a bolt of lightning struck his tent. Historians have debated whether it was really lightning, or if this was just a poetic cover story for assassination or disease. The lightning version, though, stuck in Roman lore. The idea that the most powerful man in the world could be randomly zapped out of existence was both terrifying and oddly comforting to Romans. A reminder that even emperors were not beyond the reach of the gods. Picture it now, a head of state, with nuclear codes being taken out, not by war or conspiracy, but by a freak weather event. It's absurd, yet it happened, or at least, it was recorded that way. Next up, we have Emperor Claudius, the man who unexpectedly found himself on the throne after the assassination of Caligula. Claudius was intelligent, cunning, and surprisingly competent for someone the Senate initially underestimated. But his end came not through politics or battle, but through a plate of poisoned mushrooms, or so the most popular theory goes. In 54 AD, Claudius fell gravely ill after a meal, and rumors quickly swirled that his ambitious wife, Agrippina the Younger, had arranged the whole thing to secure the throne for her son, Nero. Mushrooms, a delicacy in Rome, became his fatal last bite. What makes this even more darkly ironic is that Claudius had spent much of his reign avoiding the kind of treachery that killed his predecessors, and yet, his own dinner table may have been his undoing. It's like running a country today, with airtight cybersecurity, and then being taken down because someone slipped something into your food at a private dinner. And then there's Emperor Elagabalus, possibly the most scandalous ruler Rome ever endured, ascending to the throne at just 14 years old. In 218 AD, Elagabalus was notorious for his eccentricities, wild parties, and disregard for Roman tradition. His death in 222 AD, however, was as chaotic as his life. Betrayed by the Praetorian Guard, he was dragged from hiding, stripped naked, stabbed, and in one final insult, his body was tossed into the Tiber River. Some accounts say his corpse was so mutilated it was barely recognizable. This wasn't just a killing. It was a statement from his own guards that his rule had been a complete disgrace. In a modern comparison, think of a leader so controversial that their own security forces turn on them, but instead of a quiet resignation, it's a full-on public spectacle. One of the more bizarre ends came to Emperor Valentinian I in 375 AD. He was a strong military leader, feared and respected across the empire, but his temper was legendary. During a tense meeting with envoys from the Quadi tribe, Valentinian became so enraged that he started shouting and gesturing wildly. His anger escalated into a full-blown rage, and suddenly, he collapsed, dead from what doctors today would probably diagnose as a fatal stroke brought on by extreme stress. The official cause: he literally died of anger. Imagine CNN or BBC reporting today, breaking news: President suffers fatal heart event after shouting match in diplomatic meeting. It would sound like satire, but for Valentinian, it was real history. Asterisk. Then we have Emperor Commodus. Yes, the same man immortalized in Gladiator, though the real Commodus was arguably stranger than fiction. He fancied himself a living god, dressed as Hercules, and fought as a gladiator in the arena, which for an emperor was about as dignified as a modern president taking up professional wrestling. His death in 192 AD was almost as theatrical as his life. After a failed poisoning attempt by his concubine Marcia, Commodus was strangled in his bath by a professional wrestler named Narcissus. It's worth picturing. The emperor, muscles glistening from the bathwater, suddenly locked in a chokehold by a man trained to entertain crowds in staged combat. It was a bizarre and humiliating end for a man who had once made senators fight as gladiators for his amusement. If this happened today, imagine the world's most powerful leader being taken out in their hot tub by a disgruntled bodyguard who also moonlighted as a sports entertainer. That's Commodus. Emperor Caracalla, one of Rome's more ruthless rulers, met his own ridiculous fate in 217 AD. This was a man who ordered massacres, bankrupted the empire, and personally enjoyed seeing his enemies crushed. But when death came for him, it wasn't on the battlefield in a blaze of glory. No, Caracalla was stabbed to death by one of his own soldiers while relieving himself on the side of the road. Yes, the ruler of one of the largest empires in history died mid-toilet break. His killer, a soldier named Justin Martialis, apparently had a personal grudge. Caracalla's bodyguards, perhaps caught off guard by the sheer indignity of the situation, couldn't save him in time. Think about it. Centuries of military campaigns, endless political scheming, and it all ends because nature called at the wrong time. And then there's Emperor Galerius, a man who spent years persecuting Christians and expanding Roman control in the early 4th century. By the time his death came in 311 AD, it was so grotesque that even his enemies winced. Ancient sources claim Galerius suffered from a disease that caused his flesh to rot while he was still alive. The stench was so bad that courtiers couldn't stand to be near him, and priests declared his condition a punishment from the gods, whether it was cancer, gangrene, or some aggressive infection. The image of an emperor, the most powerful man in the empire, decaying in his palace bed while still breathing, is chilling. In a modern 2025 world, this would be headline medical news, the kind that spawns documentaries and endless online theories. But one of the most absurd and tragic ends belongs to Emperor Otho in 69 AD, during the chaotic year of the 4 emperors. Otho had seized the throne in a lightning coup, but when his rival Vitellius marched on Rome, Otho decided to avoid further civil war. His solution: he stabbed himself to death after a night of drinking. What makes it bizarre is the way he did it calmly, with full ceremonial dignity, even leaving instructions for his funeral. He didn't want to be remembered as a coward, so he committed suicide to save Rome from more bloodshed. Some historians see this as noble, others as a melodramatic overreaction. Imagine a CEO resigning not by announcement, but by literally taking their own life at a press conference for the sake of corporate unity. Speaking of drama, Emperor Pertinex's death in 193 AD was almost comedic in its tragic inevitability. Pertinax was a reformer, trying to clean up the corruption left by Commodus. But he pushed the elite Praetorian Guard too far by refusing to give them the massive cash bonus they expected when he took power. One afternoon, they stormed the palace, cut him down in broad daylight, and then, in perhaps the most ridiculous twist of all, auctioned off the throne to the highest bidder. Yes, the Roman Empire, at its height, literally sold its emperorship to Didius Julianus, who paid the guards like a sports team, signing a new owner. It's hard to overstate how absurd this was. Imagine if, in 2025, the White House staff decided they didn't like the president, killed them, and then sold the Oval Office on eBay to whoever had the biggest wallet. By now you're probably wondering how much more ridiculous these deaths can get. Trust me, we're not even at the most absurd one yet, because while being struck by lightning or dying on the toilet is bizarre, there's one emperor whose final moments read like the script of a slapstick tragedy, and yet it's recorded in sober Roman history. Before we get to the final, let's talk about Emperor Aurelian, the soldier king, who reunited a fractured empire in the 3rd century. His end in 275 AD is a masterclass in bad luck. A forged document, claiming Aurelian planned to execute several of his own officers, was slipped into the hands of his staff. They believed it without question. In a preemptive strike to save their own skins, they murdered him on the spot. The kicker: the document was completely fake. The emperor who had crushed enemies across Europe and Asia was brought down by ancient fake news. It's the Roman equivalent of a world leader today being assassinated because of a photoshopped memo on social media. But all of this pales next to the truly ridiculous fate of Emperor Gordian II. In 238 AD, Gordian and his elderly father, Gordian I, were declared co-emperors in North Africa during a rebellion against the sitting emperor Maximinus Thrax Gordian II. Only in his mid-40s. Wasn't exactly a battle-hardened general, but he decided to personally lead an army against Max forces. That army turned out to be a hastily assembled militia of locals. The result was predictable. They were crushed in battle, and Gordian II died in the fighting. His father, upon hearing the news, promptly hanged himself in despair. 2 emperors, gone in a single day, one because he overestimated his ragtag troops, the other because he couldn't handle the loss. It's like a political dynasty collapsing overnight, because they tried to take on the system with a neighborhood watch group, and now, number 1, the death that feels like it belongs in a satire, yet it's sitting right there in ancient records. Emperor Jovian, the man who briefly ruled after the death of Julian, the apostate, in 363 AD, had a short and strange reign. He was leading the army home from a disastrous Persian campaign when, according to the most widely accepted version, he died in his sleep from carbon monoxide poisoning. How? By sleeping in a tent with a brazier burning for warmth. Yes, the ruler of Rome, commander of legions, died because someone didn't ventilate the tent properly. His death was so sudden and absurd that rumors flew: assassination, divine punishment, sheer incompetence. But the brazier story stuck. It's the kind of ending you'd expect for a careless traveler, not the emperor of the world's greatest superpower. Picture a modern president being found dead in a luxury motorhome because they forgot to crack a window. That's the level of tragic ridiculousness we're talking about. So there you have it. 9 emperors, each brought down not by epic duels or cinematic last stands, but by lightning bolts, bathroom breaks, poisoned dinners, personal rage, petty politics, and, in one case, sheer lack of ventilation. It's a reminder that history is full of moments where reality is stranger than fiction. And maybe that's why these stories stick with us in 2025, because they cut through the myth of invincible leaders and show us that even the most powerful people can meet the most ridiculous ends.